Thank you everyone for being here. Whomever is standing outside and feels like joining in, please do anytime. You won't disturb. Wow. So thank you for coming. This is going to be a 1-hour conversation between a few of us who actually made what Visualizing Palestine is today. But before we delve into that, this conversation is part of a longer event. There's an exhibition. This space is an exhibition space that you're sitting in that is extending till the 22nd of February and is all sourced from this single map that's on the wall, which is also available for you in the shop. It is part of the first collaboration that we have, Visualizing Palestine, with Jameel Arts Center in Dubai. Actually, the first collaboration with an institution, an arts and culture institution in Dubai. The first one that we had in another location was actually Dar al-Nimr in Beirut a year ago, centered around the same project. What you are sitting on and around is a map of Palestine, not all of it, but the parts of it that relate to this map, which other events speak about. And those sculptures are a collaboration with artist Marwan Rishmawi, between Visualizing Palestine and Marwan Rishmawi. The biggest block there is Jerusalem. The block outside is Gaza. Some of these blocks are actually owned by individuals in Dubai, and they are produced in a series of, in an edition of 5. So please, we can speak about them later as well. Lana, thank you for the collaboration at Jameel Arts Center. Everyone who's part of the Jameel Arts Center team, thank you so much for hosting us here. Ramzi and I have been in Dubai in and out for a long time, a decade, and have done work relating to Visualizing Palestine and to TEDxRamallah. We co-founded Visualizing Palestine. Ramzi came up with the idea in 2011. We'll speak about that. And Hani Asfour and Ahmed Barkley are our partners that started Visualizing Palestine with us from as early as late 2011 and early 2012. And so with that, I will start. We're going to run it in a question-answer, and there will be some space for questions later on. I do want to note that at 6 o'clock sharp, we need to leave the room. We can continue the conversation outside because there's an event with us as well. You can come back in at 6:15 or stay in for the 6:15 conversation, which will be centered on the map and the pieces. So with that, Ramzi, Hani, and Ahmed, and myself, I'm going to start with so we're in our 9th year since setup of Visualizing Palestine. And there's a lot of work that's done out there for the Palestinian cause in different ways and natures. And Visualizing Palestine still exists 9 years in, and each one of us 4 is still in it. 9 years, or perhaps for us a bit longer, we're still in it. So what is it that makes individuals stick to something for so long? What's the drive? I'm going to start, Ramzi, with you.
Hi, everybody. How you guys doing? Why am I still involved with? I'm going to answer on this on a personal level. We were talking just before this with this talk. Well, one of the mandates of VP is to use data to create awareness and create powerful visual tools. And so, why am I still involved is because I believe in the medium into actually bringing awareness. I've seen a lot of beautiful stories of people being powerfully impacted. One of the things that I love about VPs is a platform where people can say, I have a powerful skill set to bring to something meaningful. So that's one of the reasons that it as a medium as well is really, really I go back to Palestine twice a year, and you know, things aren't getting better there, which we'll talk about later.
How many of you actually know the work of Visualizing Palestine?
That's a good question. How many people don't know?
Yeah. Okay, so maybe we'll, Hani, how would you describe Visualizing Palestine?
What Ramzi said, for me as a designer, it's just intuitive to communicate complex ideas visually. And taking these Human Rights Watch and all these data that's out there, no one's reading, just making it visual just makes it more accessible. So the intention is to democratize this knowledge and to do it piecemeal, one by one. I'm so excited to see so many people are aware of the work that we've done, and that's exactly why we do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think in a way the same thing. I think one thing is, I guess often like when we're working, producing work and working sometimes in a team, sometimes individually, we're all kind of spread around in different cities around the world. You can sometimes get disconnected from the impact, hopefully, that your work is making. So I think definitely, you know, I'm like in terms of, the reason I came to the project was as an architect and a designer, seeing the value of things like mapping and infographics and data visualization as a way of making that information more accessible. But in terms of what keeps me going with the project, I think it's events like these where you realize that there are people in the real world who are interested in your work and sharing your work. And when you're just having a conversation with someone and you say, I'm working on this project, and they say, oh, I know that project. And it's like, okay, it's a real project out there in the world that you sometimes forget when you're sort of sat there, you know, typing it away at a computer screen or something like that. So I think that's really one of those things that helps to recharge me and recharge my passion for the project.
For those of you who don't know, Visualizing Palestine, behind us are 4 infographics. So this is the baseline of our work. And we've produced over 100 infographics to date in English and in Arabic. And but that's only one of the platforms we use or one of the tools we produce. Ramzi, when you started Visualizing Palestine right after TEDxRamallah in 2011, there was something that was very clear in you that was missing out there in the context of communication about Palestine. And of course, it was coming at a very specific time in 2011. How today would you speak about this thing that prompted you to run with what is today perhaps quite an established communication platform whose material is usable in thousands of contexts, etc. Yeah.
So I mean, okay, so just, I don't know how many people know the genesis. The VP started when I was, when we were organizing TED Talks in Palestine. I was inundated with data and statistics about my own occupation that I had no clue. I was, you know, educated in Western pretty good universities. I was born in Jerusalem, yet I had no clue. And at the time, these data were legitimate, you know, their data. So that's how can we, as Hani said, democratize this data. So so at the time, yeah. So that's I mean, to answer your question, I think there were several things that legitimizes our story. I think that's one of the things why it ties even TEDxRamallah to this. TEDxRamallah was putting Palestinian speakers on a platform that's very reputable. Data is legitimate. Even the design work that we through Hani, your work, and through Jumana, and Ahmed, the maps are legitimate in today's world. So I think there's this aspect of legitimacy when it comes to creating the stories. I don't know if this answer.
I think I'd like the story how we met.
Yeah.
What I think was interesting. Because I met you through Jumana. You had started TEDxRamallah. Jumana came to me and she said, can you help us with the branding of TEDxRamallah? And that's how we met. And and with TEDx, you have very strict branding, so we
Yeah.
really had to follow all the rules. And then we worked together on that. And then, you disappeared. You went back. I don't know where you went. And then, we lost touch. And then Jumana came back and said, we have this idea, Ramzi and I, to create. Ramzi had this idea. I want to help him make it happen. Can you help us with the branding and with the positioning and all of that? And
I remember we locked you up for 2 days.
you tied me to a chair, right? They called me to Amman. I was in Beirut. They called me to Amman, and there I was. Suddenly, they locked the doors, said you can't leave.
We fed him well. Good coffee.
That was good coffee, actually. And then, so in Amman, in 2 days, we hammered out what we call the process, right? And I don't know if it's coming. I'm looking at the screen to see if it's going to come
So it's
out.
like some kind of circle.
Yeah.
Process wheel.
You know what? I'll look for it.
Yeah.
Continue while I look for it.
Yeah, and then at the same time, we realized that we need a full team. We need so many experts and people to work with us. And at the same time, Ahmed, you were doing some amazing work on your own website, and they showed it to me and they said, we're thinking of bringing Ahmed on board, and I was just flabbergasted because your work was really incredible.
This part, I didn't know this part of the story.
I'll actually follow up with a question specifically about your life, Ahmed. And to orient you, we will have space to speak about Visualizing Palestine, but this is really to introduce you to some of the people behind it. So if you're curious about the work itself, this is really intending to have you understand the people behind it. Not only the work itself. Ahmed, you're an architect. Ramzi, you're an engineer. Hani, you're an architect. I am an architect. And we're working in visual communication, digital world, barely any physical world. Ahmed, you actually, who's an architect here? Okay, a few of you. So architecture in the UK it demands of the person until they are registered a number of steps that are beyond what other locations actually require. So Ahmed finished his quite difficult step of part 3 in architecture and then left architecture to join Visualizing Palestine, to join and set up Visualizing Palestine. So Ahmed, that's a huge risk and a big step in a life to both leave the UK, leave architecture, and at a time when there was nothing, Ramzi had started a couple of workshops. I joined him, Hani sort of had joined at the time, and you came in, you left the UK, you came to Amman, you stayed over, and voila, Visualizing Palestine. How does a human being do that, take a risk like that?
I don't know. I think that I guess the opportunity outweighed the risk. Maybe. What I used to always say is that people who study architecture, I feel like that it comes slightly out of this ambition, this kind of megalomaniacal ambition to kind of reshape the world around you. Maybe partly you want to leave this kind of lasting impression, maybe in the built environment or something like this. And I feel like actually through the practice of architecture, I guess you realize that you're kind of fulfilling the kind of ambitions of rich people who can afford to build like projects, basically. I mean, you might be lucky, maybe you get to work on other kinds of projects, but I think for the my sense was that actually, like the skills that you learn as an architect, there are other ways that you can use them. You know, that you can. I mean, it might be to do with influencing policy in relation to the built environment, but not necessarily through building projects that just so you can practice as an architect that you do that. I mean, but specifically, like why I would join Visualizing Palestine, I think it relates to a couple things. Is one, I mean, I'm not actually Palestinian, but my parents met in Palestine. I lived in Palestine when I was young. I've always had a lot of Palestinian friends and almost like relations. So it's I feel it was always like a second home to me. And I know there are lots of Palestinians who've never been to Palestine, so I'm a little different in that sense. But so for me, it was something always close to my heart. So I always I think any opportunity to work on a meaningful project about Palestine, liberating Palestine, even eventually maybe that it's something that was very meaningful to me. And the experience with connecting with Ramzi and Jumana in particular through TEDxRamallah, and knowing that they had, the ability as a team to kind of pull off this huge, wonderful project. And I'd been involved in a small way from London to do a screening of that project. So I felt like, it wasn't so much of a risk of just joining some project on paper. It was like joining a team of people who had an ambition and a drive and a kind of dedication to kind of realizing that project. So in that case, I felt like it was much more an opportunity than it was a kind of risk. I think the risk was not joining the project at that point and seeing it sail without me, or something like this.
The first few months, Ahmed, we actually had the office was in Amman. It was a home that was empty in Amman that we actually lived and worked from for how long? 2 months, was it?
Yes. Maybe more. No, actually, it was about 2 months less, maybe even less. Yeah.
Ramzi and Hani,
This is when we first. Do you want to? This is your sketch. Was it our sketch? All
together,
of us.
we did it together.
Yeah.
This was how we developed the ecosystem. If you want.
It's all scribbles. Don't worry if you don't understand it.
Yeah.
And then it became this.
Yeah.
And then so that's.
So there are basically three phases: the research phase.
Sorry. It's just it's
research, design, and then reception. And then we had to figure out that we need actually people to translate the data into visuals and then publish them and then measure how they've been received. So this is the big picture of it. But then in each one, we had different. We broke this down even so there were slides for each phase. What do we need to do? Yeah. So it became a bit more complicated. But this was the initial sketch. And I love. Can you go back to that sketch? I love that. That's.
Which one?
The scribble.
The scribble, okay.
This is how ideas start. This is beautiful.
So from those scribbles to those exquisite visuals, the second infographic, the politicians' salaries, is an infographic that won an award. Information is Beautiful is basically the reference point for information design, and that visual won it, I believe, in 2013. Ramzi, Hani, and Ahmed. So what's the impact of all of this? Perhaps impact stories that mark you most.
I had one impact story. Do you want to
go ahead?
No, but not of this visual.
No.
One impact story. I was at a conference in the U.S. I was organized by JVP. It's a group that does amazing work on awareness in Palestine. And then they had like 40-something chapters across the U.S. And I'd be meeting a lot of them. And one of them from JVP, which stands for Jewish Voice for Peace, through the awesome institution movement. And one of them was when he found out it was Palestine, he's like, look, I was talking to this group in the university that. It was a feminist group. They weren't sure what to do about Palestine, but then they showed one of the infographics, and then right away they decided to vote for a divestment motion for the university. So he was telling me of there was a bit of a gratitude in terms of how he got a whole group to change their mind. So that's one impact story of
there are many people outside. Please do feel free to come in. There's no interruption. It's fine. Fluid. Just walk in.
We don't bite. Come. There's lots of space.
There's cushions. There's 1, 2, 3 cushions at least near the front.
It's like people are scared. Here, just come. Don't worry. Come.
There's also wall space at the end. Feel free to.
Walk towards Gaza.
There's more space towards Gaza. I don't think ever. Space and Gaza.
Come. Let's go to Gaza.
So Gaza is the piece outside, purposely.
Also outside the barrier.
Yeah. So. Oh wow! Actually, there's a few photos of Impact. Maybe I'll bring them.
Yeah.
Impact, Exqua. Should we just say a few words of them?
Yes.
So This is the Labour Party in the UK, right? Ahmed, you.
This was like this is like the Labour Party conference in, I don't know what, 2014 or something.
Yeah.
We have this picture here. This guy who's looking at the poster on the far left.
Far right.
Far right. Of course, far right. It makes sense. So this is like the deputy to the Israeli ambassador to the UK at the time, I think.
So
he's
learning about his own occupation.
Not expecting to find these posters in the kind of Labour Party conference. So.
Who's actually downloaded the visuals and used them in any context?
Yeah, actually, that's really interesting. Nadia, okay.
Nadia, Noor, do you want to actually, Noor, share a story?
Yeah, so me and my sister were part of Students for Justice in Palestine in the States when we were studying for college. I don't know if people are familiar with it, but it's just a grassroots organization that advocates for Palestinian rights. And so every year we had a mock apartheid wall that we put up on campus, and it would be between the cafeteria and the library, so a huge passive point for people. And so it was like this huge 8-foot wall, like would span, and we used a lot of, like, we physically painted Visualizing Palestine infographics on the walls, and so people would come up and be able to like approach the information easily, and people would ask us questions and ask what we're doing there, or shout at us or come and support us. But it was a great way that we used the visuals to like attract people and really come and see.
Anyone who's used the material online with a story that we might not even know?
Online all the time. Social media all the time.
Farah, do you want to share why or?
Just for the recording for the video, it would be great if we could capture your voice.
Farah Nabilsi is a filmmaker, absolute inspiration. She just actually won an award for a film that she's produced. Please. Yeah.
Okay, let's keep to the subject. So, with a lot of my work, but also with the activism online, continuously using visuals from Visualizing Palestine, to be honest. So it's so succinct, it's so powerful to use something so, when they say a visual or an image can speak 1,000 words or 10,000 words, that's the case with Visualizing Palestine. So sometimes when you're on social media, just putting one visual from you guys, that's it. The argument is over. It's there, it's clear, and I use them all the time. So, on all different fronts, whether it's to do with the wall, or to do with the United Nations vetoes, or to do with the settlements, so all the time, online, very powerful, very powerful.
Yeah, please do mention.
Go ahead.
At least say the name of the film.
What Mazen is trying to do,
Okay,
so Mazen Masri at the back is an inspiration in the realm of the ecosystem on work on Palestine and for Palestinians. And one of the things he's trying to tease out of this community and asking Farah to do is to highlight that Visualizing Palestine is actually not independent from Farah, independent from Real Palestine, independent from everyone who's sitting here, SJP, etc. We are an ecosystem, and the fact that amongst us is someone who just came back from winning an award is only strengthening all of us, and the fact that Farah uses our material, and Real Palestine, and Students for Justice in Palestine. I'm only mentioning the faces I know. I'm sure there are many. This is what Mazen is really trying to send a message about. So,
yeah, we're all totally connected, and we're all at different parts of the sort of funnel or filter in our activism and in our sort of striving for freedom and justice and equality and all of that, and all different parts of the ecosystem. So on my front, I make films related to Palestine, fiction films based on fact, and my latest film is called The Present, it just premiered in France and won the Audience Award, actually. So that's the interesting part. It's one of the biggest festivals in the world, and it's considered the #1 festival for short films. My film is 24 minutes. Over 165,000 spectators. 80 films were selected from 9,000. And when it came to the awards, the audience chose The Present. And that tells you something about international audience, French audience, and this film is hardcore when it comes to, you know, without saying the words apartheid, occupation, and so forth, it's in the film. And so, thank you. But so the point is, when I go past my films, so online and you know, on platforms, panels, speaking engagements, I go beyond my film speaking. It comes down to, okay, now past the films, past the emotive, where are the facts, where are the figures? And unfortunately, people aren't so excited about facts and figures, you know, because it doesn't really speak to their hearts. But when you have visuals that are so succinct and you can put out there as the next step, for me, that's an invaluable tool. You know, it's the next layer. And it's the same for all sorts. For you mentioned JVP, PSC, the labor government. Like it's really an invaluable tool. Visualizing Palestine to me is obviously non-violent, okay? At the same time, it's a weapon and an invaluable one. So that's my opinion.
Thank you. Ramzi, Hani, Ahmed, we can't dig up everything that's in each one of us in this short period, and we're going to leave some time for questions, but what's one thing that you really want to share that people won't know unless you're here physically to tell them? They won't know from the infographics or something really deeply rooted in you, Ramzi. Or
can we throw that question back to you, Jamallah?
Yeah.
Yeah, there we
that's
go.
a
Well
good
done.
Yeah.
Well done, Ahmed.
Nice one.
Okay.
Yeah.
You have to answer that difficult question.
Yeah.
So I joined Ramzi in TEDxRamallah, actually. People think that I joined because Palestine is the first word. It's the top thing that made me join TEDxRamallah. In fact, the reason there are many initiatives out there that are about Palestine and that are actually doing very effective work. What was extremely inspiring to me is to have found a partner with whom vision is a driver to both of us, alignment on vision and collaboration. And this is something for someone who'd worked a decade before that almost. It's precious and it's missing in the region. And so we might have many initiatives, but to know how to collaborate and to be able to put collaboration and vision on top of it and to be driven by that was absolutely inspiring. I felt like what we were putting out there beyond the visuals themselves, and that's what is not spoken about enough, is that there are people behind that have actually are setting what I believe a standard of inspiration for individuals who are graduating from the best universities in the world. All of us four have graduated from very well-established universities. We left our disciplines, we integrated our disciplines in what we're doing, and we have set up a social enterprise that shows youth today that actually speaking about justice and human rights and so on can be inspiring and is not only fit for the realm of activism and charity. It is actually integral within our daily life and a source of inspiration. So as an architect myself and a striver for visual appeal and beauty, this to me, and the way we set up an operation that actually is a very robust operation that can compete with businesses. We won the MIT Social Enterprise Award in 2015, I believe. We are establishing standards that are beyond the story of what is perceived and seen through the infographics. And this is huge in a place where we're all divided as countries. So.
I'd like to probably talk about, if we look at the screen there, we see a glimpse of a graphic you haven't seen, you haven't released it. So one of the things, to answer the question, Juman, one of the things that we do is that we prepare graphics in anticipation of an event. So this is in anticipation of elections in Palestine. So this one hasn't been released because for 10 years they haven't had elections, right? And so this is something that happens behind the scenes. So we have an archive of graphics that we've worked on as a team. And the way we work on a graphic is that we fight a lot, actually. We argue a lot. We manage the arguments. We move them into constructive space in order to come up with things. What are the things that we argue about? What is the key message that we want to send from this? Because the data is so vast. What is the key message? How are we going to translate the data into a visual? What kind of visual do we need to do? What kind of output? Is it going to be a wearable? Is it going to be a poster, a coaster? We don't know. So, and then the format and which size is it going to be? And a lot of discussions over there. And if we take them to the bus, I think the bus story is very good. Which angle do we look at?
I'll look for it.
Yeah, look for it. And then, so I have to, the story of the bus came from Ahmed. He was, maybe you tell them how you came up with the story and then.
Yeah, sure. So maybe actually go back a few slides if you can to
the bus schedule. Yeah.
There's like a.
This one?
Yeah, why not that? So basically, it was through an awareness. I mean, I think there was a what's it called? An action that took place that was about highlighting highlighting the kind of discrimination against Palestinians and how Palestinians in the West Bank, for example, live in the same physical space as Israeli settlers, but they're discriminated against on every level, effectively through the ID card that they hold, right? So if you're Israeli, you're living in an illegal settlement in the West Bank, you have an Israeli ID card and an Israeli passport or whatever. And that means you can come and go, you can commute every day to Jerusalem, West Jerusalem, or even to Tel Aviv from some places.
So where all of you are sitting.
So they wanted to highlight this discrimination by trying to ride a bus. So they got on a bus they couldn't necessarily go into a settlement, but they found somewhere along the road that bus stopped, that they could access, and they got on that bus. And then when they got through to the checkpoint, someone comes, or the guard comes onto the what's it called, the security guy comes onto, what would you call it, the military police, whatever. So they'll come and they check that everyone has the right ID card, and there are these 3-4 Palestinians on the bus who don't have the right ID card. And they managed to make a media event out of this, so it was reported around the world. And then, in my mind, the question is, what does this bus system look like? And how can it help people to understand about Israeli settlements? So, finding this website, that there was a site called bus.co.il, which actually has most of the bus routes throughout the entire.
This one.
So most of the Israeli bus routes wherever they go to. So the first task was to kind of understand what the destinations and starting points are of these buses and how many of those locations are in the West Bank, which is quite a lot. It's a small fraction of all the buses actually, but it's like maybe more than 100 buses.
These are all the buses from Jerusalem to the settlements, right?
Yeah, so I think there were something like 30-something unique routes, but then there were multiple buses that ran those routes, like sub-routes and whatever. So there was this kind of process of, and I think in this case it was a bit unusual because in my mind there was a very clear endpoint because there's people are very, the transit map is something that's very familiar to people. So you can use that as a way to show how everyday it is for Israelis to cross the wall effectively. It's not just about going into the kind of annexed areas of the West Bank. They go beyond that every day to the settlements. So by locating those routes and creating this kind of transit map, it was supposed to be a way of showing this kind of everyday nature of occupation and discrimination. But it doesn't end there because we're going, so I think the final point I reached with this, which was usually, I'm not doing the front-end graphic design of the work. So so I think in this case I got as far as this point actually, and it was just a London transit map, kind of done as a West Bank Israeli bus route.
So the settlers would find this very useful. That's basically, literally that's what.
And I've seen actually the final map. I've seen it posted like on a blog as if it's a genuine map
of the buses.
So there were two interesting things in this. The one is that you know, this is it's taking a template from a London bus map and kind of just applying it to this. And in this case, you know, we're working with Hani, who's an expert like in graphic design and communication, information design. And I've learned so much from Hani in the last like 8 years. But in terms of graphic design, I mean, so at this point in the process, we start working together, and it's not just me and Hani. It's you know, everyone's involved in this process of feedback and discussion. So Hani, maybe you take it from here, because
Well, yeah. When I saw the map, I was just blown away by the heavy lifting that Ahmed had done in it, and he wanted it, you know, as someone who grew up in England with a British sense of humor, to actually make the map for the Israelis to use it. And I was in positions like, I don't get this humor. I don't know what you're trying to do. I think the key message is that the Israelis can cross the wall easily every day. So what's the purpose of the wall if they can cross it? If it's supposed to be a barrier, why do they cross it?
it's a one-way barrier.
It's right. So on the left of the screen is actually it's called the bus map. It's meant for the tongue-in-cheek for the Israelis, and that's the one that's been posted on the blog.
This isn't the final version.
Yeah, it's not the final version.
This
was like some kind
one
of
version.
okay, yeah, that's
because there's one. It's called like Greater Israel Bus Connection.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
yes.
So it's meant to be like to anyone who kind of knows what's going on. It's like it's a tongue-in-cheek joke, and it talks about how they're collaborating with the Palestinian Authority to ensure the security of Israeli settlers and all this kind of stuff. So if you're kind of on the in joke, it makes sense.
Yeah.
But if you're not, it's like.
And the one on the right is actually the final version. If you can see in terms of graphics, it highlights the key messages through it. The wall is yellow, and it says across the wall, and then the buses just penetrate through it, and it has this moving to the right incursion. You can see some of the graphics. So in terms of, as a graphic designer, I mean, I thanked VP for this opportunity because I felt I learned tremendous amount, and I'm very proud of that outcome as a collective effort. Yeah.
This is a tool I use this map when I say I want to go to min Ramallah la Beit Lahem. I would have to take a segregated route all the way around Jerusalem, and then so I can go to Jerusalem. But a lot of people actually, especially settlers or anything or Israelis, they take a bus that goes right through it. So here you can see clearly roads that are segregated, or roads, you know, or buses that you're not allowed on. And then we have a series of visuals on the ID system, because that's the mechanism used to have two tiers of people. So
what percentage of the routes can Palestinians actually use?
what percentage of them actually used? Buses? Here, none of these buses, they have their own. None of these ones. But they have other, we use service. We don't have.
Yeah, so sometimes it's a bit more. It's a bit weirder than that in a way.
Yeah.
So there are some routes that Palestinian laborers will use.
Yeah.
But then even those, they started actually having parallel bus routes. So for one that was very popular or commonly used by, you know, Palestinians who effectively had work permits to just make money in, you know, on the other side of the line, which is now a very small number of people. It used to be very common actually. The Israeli settlers complained, like, we can't share buses with, you know, these Palestinians, and they actually set up this apartheid, you know, segregated kind of bus system on those routes.
Yeah. So you basically go to a bus, you show them a color ID. If it's the wrong color ID, you get off the bus. Like literally, that's what happens. Or if you try, or they're in their cars, if it's a wrong color license plate, you can't be behind the driver's seat. We'll show you. This is a French architect. We did l'Archipel de Palestine Orientale. This one we found online. It was like the archipelagos of Palestine. So this is not just us who kind of show these fragmentation of where we live as well. Maybe I'll show the streets, the segregated.
Ramzi, I'd love for you to bring out one thing before we get some people to ask questions as well. Yeah.
What would you like?
No, whatever you choose.
Whatever I choose?
Whatever you're going for, but to make sure this is the one thing you really want to share.
Okay, so yeah, no pressure. Oh wow. It's either this or the ID system. What you want, guys?
ID system.
ID system? Huh? The car. What's
License plate, okay.
wait? What's it called? Okay, I'll just quickly. This is the segregated ID system. This is the roads, but
This may be in ways where people who are not seeing the screen to
Yeah.
actually understand what's being spoken about.
Taib. Okay, so I'll talk about the ID system quickly. How many people here know about the ID system? Okay. How many people have an ID? Yeah.
Yes.
One.
So about
there's
five
like
people.
Five.
people
Okay.
or
Okay.
more,
That's
yeah.
good.
Exactly. Like, you have an UNRWA card?
Exactly. Like this one. That's just small. I'll quickly just could talk about it. This is a story in South Africa. Apartheid started in 1948, 1949. In South Africa, they had the Population Registration Act because they couldn't often tell who's black, who's white because there's segregation there. So they created something called the pencil test. That was 1949, which is put the pencil in your hair. If it falls down, you're white. If it stays, you're black. And to solve that problem in 1950, they used the Population Registry Act, which has in your ID, it tells you what race you are, what ethnicity. So here's they're from white all the way to other colored. Effectively, we have something very, very similar. And we have sort of the 5 versions of the colors, 5 IDs. Wait, stop. Oops. Let's go back. Here, let's just, sorry, I'm gonna keep this with me. Basically everybody in the entire Israeli, Palestinian, any religion, all of them are in one single population registry. So because most people think Israel and Palestine are 2 separate entities, they're not. It's one border, one airspace, one currency. We use the Israeli shekel. And in this population registry, we are classified. And according to classification, we have privileges. So that's how it is. This is one where, now they do this very common. So the first day this was done, I was on the border. They put my nationality as ISR. This is an entry permit for myself. And I was like, oh, if I'm Israeli, then I can go anywhere. I can go to Jerusalem. But I couldn't, obviously. I shared this. I got 300 shares. I got an Israeli journalist contacting me. I got scared. So I told them, sorry, no comment. And I took it down. So that, so here, this is an infographic we really labored on, Ahmed and Hani, and we got a lot of people. We have many different versions of it.
It's currently at Cinema Aqil, standing there. It's been there since Real Palestine. Yeah.
Was it Tim who worked on it?
And to mention also, there's the sixth non-ID on this.
Yes,
on
exactly.
This one. So you have
here this one.
Palestinian refugees who are denied ID are also represented.
Exactly.
So when you work with a team who's passionate about information and data and information design, you can never get out of them about themselves and about the journey. You can always guarantee that they're going to go back to the infographics. But I want to actually, we'll come back to our final notes or anything we want to add. Any questions that you have to any one of the teams, I would love for you to get this opportunity. Ahmed lives in Beirut. We have a team member in Boston, Toronto recently, Cairo, Ramallah, Amman. So this is a rare instance. It's only recently that Hani, Ramzi, and myself are actually in the same location. We have gone through periods where we're in 7 different countries at 9 hours apart working. So with that in mind, if you have questions that really bring something out of each one before we disperse back.
Actually, my question is about exactly that. I think that you've talked a little bit about your process, and the collaboration is challenging at best. You add the spatial difference and temporal difference, but on top of that, how do you manage to keep your sense of humor? Because your work expresses an ability to maintain a sense of humor within what are infographics. And so I want to compliment you on that, but I think it's key to your process and maybe even overcoming the challenges of the distance?
It's funny. I would say the weird thing is that there was, I think, especially when we were together in one place, there was always a lot of humor.
Yeah.
And actually, we were more frustrated by the fact that the humor didn't come through the work, and it seemed very serious.
Yeah.
The outcome. And we've talked so many times about doing something that's more like.
We did. We had one output actually that was included humor, which is a video that we did. We didn't brand it as VP. Remember?
Right. Yeah. And I should say that there.
Viewed in all of your work. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
there are small touches that I think this one's an example actually. So we have this one called Where Law Stands on the Wall, and it's represented through these judges standing on the wall. So, but the irony of that is that the title came last. So we had this idea of the judges of the international, what's it called, the ICJ, the International Court of Justice.
Yeah.
And their position that the wall was illegal, and that was a way of kind of somehow breaking a hole in the wall. And we were never happy with any of the titles we came up with. And then suddenly at the end, like it's like Where Law Stands on the Wall, and we were thinking like positionality. And then it's like, wait a minute, these guys are standing on the wall. So ironically, although the title fits, really is the thing that kind of puts this one together, and it has a bit of humor, is actually the last thing of that visual.
Here are some photos of our office in Beirut as well. Maybe that's like where we had a lot of kind of some of the works. This isn't sort of so I think maybe it gives a little insight into some of the. Yeah, that's Naji there. Yeah. So that's just I don't know if that answers your question.
Naji's like a super important part of the
Yeah.
story. Yeah, we should mention
I
who
wish
Naji
she was
is.
here. Yeah.
So really, like this first visual that.
Oh, okay.
So this visual hunger strikes over here, which was the first one that we released.
Yeah.
The graphic design work was by
Naji,
Naji Elmir, who's standing in the image here.
A designer in Paris. Mona, you had a question.
I have two questions. One is directed to you in the sense of how do you, in the journey, maintain the integrity of your work by being, because I know this is something that you've been going through, making the change, being authentic to what your vision is, not being influenced by supporters, like, in terms of the economy of this work. So this is for you, because my recent interaction with you has highlighted this importance, as we know, in the world of corruption. So this is for you to, the other side is for the four of you to tell us, you do all this work for this audience, what would you like us to do with your work? Because it doesn't stop at you. I know that it's all about us receiving this and doing something with it. So what would you like us to do with it?
Very good questions. Can we have some time?
So Mona is a Visualizing Palestine member. Who would like to state? Some of you may not even like to state, and we respect the privacy. But who's a Visualizing Palestine member? Okay. Thank you for being members. And I think what you're referencing, Mona, is our approach to how we stand on our feet financially. Is that part of the integrity you're referencing? So it's very easy in the world of nonprofits to fall into what I personally believe is a hamster's wheel trap of applying to grants, relying on very few individual funders, and then you keep on, trying to be more charming, sexier, adapt your work to speak to them, etc. And as the journey went by, and in our 9th year now, it became also very apparent that the sources of the grants are mostly US-based, partly Europe-based, of the ones that actually we were seeking. And even the ones that the very rare ones that are available in the Arab world, actually rely heavily on the ones we were sourcing from initially. So this is sort of a mind game for us where, okay, there's something that obviously isn't moving within the region. It clearly is not that economy does not allow for such projects to exist. It's more a mindset, a heart set, a fear set, a communication set, many things that make us what we are today as sort of very charity-oriented, not necessarily institutional grants, etc. And so, a couple of years, 2 years back, we started testing even more. In 2017, we started testing a membership program, not only on the premise of needing finances. It actually was not about needing finances. It was more about knocking at the door of communities and saying, where's your heart? Where's your belief? Maybe you're working in a company that has a CSR arm, but that's a model. Will you join and sort of like you would pay for a newspaper online, would you join to assure that Visualizing Palestine material actually exists? And so from that, today we have over 500 members in over 190 cities around the world. 85 of the Visualizing Palestine members are out of the UAE. So we're really proud of where all of our hearts are. So thank you for that. When you mention integrity, it's really about not untying money from belief, engagement, heart, and bringing it all back as part of the story. Yeah.
To add to your point as well, there have been times where we say we work with organizations, especially data we source from. Their funding stipulates them certain messaging. Whether it's even saying one state or two states, even that, so we had to make sure that our messaging is sharp. If we want to use the word apartheid, we can. If we want to use segregated, we want to use institutionalized discrimination, we need to be able to say words as they really are. And no amount of funding is going to stop us from that. Another thing is that we also consciously, right from the get-go, say this is about humans, about equality, it's about people. It's not about nationalistic. We don't have any nationalistic colors, no flags, nothing like that. It's about rights, it's about us, it's about individuals. That are not supposed to separate. But in that sense, integrity as well is another.
Yeah, we keep the focus on social justice, and we don't see ourselves as taking a nationalistic, politicized answer. So I think the integrity comes from just a very clear message, social justice. And that makes it very easy, actually, to stay focused on the work that we do and the work that we produce. So many times I'd add in a green color and Ramzi would say no. Blue, not for Israel, green, not for the Palestinians. And so if you notice, we never do that. Sometimes we slip as designers, and Ramzi comes and points that out. And so, yeah, we're like.
I think the British made a terrible mistake with these maps, actually, with the colors they chose.
When I had a second question, but I also want to take perhaps other questions before we answer second.
Hi. First, I would like to ask you, how do you find time? Like, I'm sure you all have several stuff, not only Visualizing Palestine. And what keeps this motivation every day? You wake up and you want to do something in Visualizing Palestine. You want to be inspired. You got stories from your own personal experiences. What is this advice from you to us to keep us actually working on such initiatives? Because I personally have this difficulty. Like every day I work in some of my profession as an architect and to sustain my life. But at the same time, I have so many ideas I want to do, but it's really hard to keep myself motivated and working on it. This is one. Two, do you have a platform that we can share ideas to you from our own experiences? Because I saw so many visuals that were coming out of your experiences, and I think everyone here, they know someone that they have a story, or they are actually experiencing that. Maybe a platform that we can sketch, we can write, we can post, we can. Actually, that would be interesting.
We based just to kind of riff out, we used to have, and actually those were the photos, we used to have charrettes, design charrettes, where we invited people, this is in Beirut, and we invited people to come and we sketch out together. That was a long time ago. We stopped doing that because of the disbursement, but maybe it's online, more online tools?
I think, like, I mean, the people do email us, like, like data.
Yeah.
I see what you mean. I mean, there's a few ways to look at it. But I was gonna say, I do remember a couple of instances where people kind of like sent emails and said, "Oh, you should work on this," and it actually clicked and turned into something. Off the top of my head, I can't think of a specific example, but I think I can think that there were at least a couple of graphics where it was like that. Another time when there was a partner that had data about like the people killed in like one of the wars on Gaza, and they came in with a data set of like where all these people were from, in terms they were all, 2/3 of them were refugees. So we created this map, and it was purely the partner that came with the idea, and it just clicks, and it's like, yeah, that's a really good idea, let's just do it.
So to answer your first question, because I think this is a good one where each one will respond, because your first question is like, how do we find the motivation to keep doing it despite having time pressures away, right? And maybe this is something that each of us answer. I'm going to answer just quickly my response. I was thinking about last year. Last year I go. So for me, it's probably easier than I go to Palestine, and that's something that really impacts me. Last year we attended a tour. We took من الداخل. We went from Hebron, Khalil, the segregated road, all the way to the Holocaust Museum. So like it was just so that one was just, and some people still came away with the wrong idea. Like, so carrying those stories, for me, that's something that is a response to yours of how am I motivated, but and a family there. But maybe Hani, would you?
For me, I mean, as a designer, I see a great idea that's being represented, and I feel we can represent it much better. So that rides me, and it challenges me to make it communicate in a more compelling way. So yeah, so I make time for it. Yeah, I make time.
I'm gonna take your question, but before that, I would like to highlight that actually, I don't know if we're the right people to answer your question, because as a matter of fact, both Ramzi and myself, as co-founders of Visualizing Palestine and as co-curators of TEDxRamallah, both of us had it full time. And so the possibility of Hani having it like in increments of his life, and Ahmed having it as a full-time job really, is also because our model, or the way we were able to do it, was that we were two people full-time on it. So no way, we're not doing it part-time to establish it at all.
Yeah, no way part-time works.
Yeah.
Zero.
We have to close in 2 minutes, empty the room. I'll just take we'll take 2 questions for Hani, Ramzi, and Ahmed to answer you outside while we set up the room for the next. But do please give us the questions so everybody hears them.
So my question is,
can you raise your voice?
Do you ever face any opposition to your work from Jewish Israeli groups, and how do you face that? How do you resolve that?
So repeating the question, do you face any opposition from particular groups, whether Jewish, Israeli, or I guess Zionist?
And a question at the back.
Sure, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Have any of your infographics been published on international media, and how does it work? Do they pay for it, or is it free, or?
So we will continue this outside, and Muna, your question was not answered about what can others do, and perhaps that's a good place to close. Amongst us here are Visualizing Palestine members. If you'd like to subscribe, first of all, to receive the content, that's very important. Receive the content, share the content. This is all about the knowledge. And then if you'd like to make sure this initiative exists, do join as a Visualizing Palestine member. And then as a member, we send you a list of things that you can do and take initiative. It's not our project. Once it's out there, it's yours. So be inspired. Don't limit yourself, and just do whatever you want to do with it. Ramzi, Hani, Ahmed, before we close, if you'd like to say one more thing, and we do invite you to the shop if you'd like the Jerusalem map.
Start with Hani, I'll end.
Yeah.
Oh, you'll end. Okay. It's just wonderful to see everyone here, and it's having you take our work, our collective work, and spread it for me, the happiest moment was that one infographic we did that within a week had 1 million views on Facebook. And that was, for me, the most satisfying thing. So we need you to spread the word and tell us what you also want to illustrate, and we'll do it.
Thanks everyone for coming. I think, like Juman said, we're very short for time, so any kind of questions and whatever. And I'd be happy to answer the questions that people put. So if you want to come to me for answers or anyone else, then do.
Thank you.
I think one of the things is that the fact that how packed this room is and there's people outside just shows that there's incredible amount of passion behind this, huh? Thirst. And so this is the things why it's still moving on. And I'd love to see how to work with different people, with the community. I think one word that's been repeated a lot in VP is the word community. So I wonder how do we interface as much as we can with the community. So that's the.
Since you're based in Dubai, I stress, please do subscribe. You will get information. If there's a gathering, you will be part of it. Don't treat this as a one-off. This is what we invite you to do.
Exactly. That's it.
85 to 100, from tonight.
And a big thank to our Jamil.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, big thanks. Sorry.